Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. My name is Marisa Frangi. I am the Director of the Office of Family and Sanctity of Life, and I am a certified fertility care practitioner and also an educator intern. And I would like to welcome all of you to this seminar. Thank you, and thank you to everyone who made this seminar possible, starting with Sayyidna and Monsignor Jim and the School of Evangelization, Christian Rada and Ted Moscow. This is, as you know, this is an event co-sponsored by the FRT of St. Maron, and just so you know, not only it's being live broadcast, but we have people conference calling from other states, from the Maronite parishes, who are listening to the seminar also with us. I'm very grateful for your presence here, and I'm really excited about this evening. Only practitioner people can understand how excited we're all about this event, because we really understand how important this work is, and we want to spread this word. Before I introduce our bishop who's going to do the opening prayer, I just want to share with you two stories. One of them had really helped me a lot to feel that this is really needed work and inspired more what we're doing tonight. This is a story of one practitioner intern that I met in Omaha a few months ago, and she was sharing what made her become a practitioner. When she was engaged, her priest made it required for her and her fiancé to go and take natural family planning classes. They were sexually active. Well, we don't even use the word sexually active. They were having intimate intercourse before marriage, and she was using a birth control pill. And when they went to learn the created model, they were determined that they've not given up the birth control pill or their lifestyle. But she said the way the practitioner was teaching them, something attracted her, and she decided to come back for follow-up sessions. And she said the practitioner challenged their bad behavior. And as a result of learning the created model system and the follow-up sessions, they end up embracing secondary chastity until they got married. She stopped using the birth control pill, and she came into the Catholic faith. So what we're doing in the created model is really great work that unfortunately not a lot of people talk about it, not a lot of people know about it, so that's why we're so glad that we were able to do this seminar to educate all of you about it. Some people are here and they're wondering if this is going to really benefit them. So there's another short story that I heard from one of the Lighthouse CD about a little girl who went to a store, and she liked the bracelet made from pearl, plastic pearl. And she voted, and her father voted for her, and she was wearing it always. And every night her father would come to her and he would ask her to give him the bracelet. And the daughter would refuse to take it off. Day after day, weeks after weeks, he would ask her, and she would refuse to do that. Until one day, where she accepted and she gave it to her father. And when she did, her father gave her a box, and when she opened the box, she found in the box a bracelet with real pearl. The moral of the story, some of us have our mind already set that the Catholic Church is against women, the Catholic Church doesn't have something good to offer to women. So what I'm asking all of you here, give us your plastic bracelet and let us give you the real one, because what you're going to learn in here today, this is the real teaching of the Church, and no one as much as the Catholic Church upholds the dignity of women. So, to introduce our first dear speaker, who's our bishop, our dear Bishop Gregory Mansour. Sayyidna Bishop Gregory Mansour was born in Michigan. He was ordained to the priesthood in 1982, and after 1 year he became the pastor of his first assignment in Uniontown. In 2004, Pope John Paul II made him bishop, and he was consecrated as the bishop of the Eparchy of St. Maron. And we're so blessed, all the Maronites on the East Coast, we're so blessed to have such a wonderful bishop as Sayyidna Gregory. Sayyidna Gregory also was nominated recently as the chairman of Catholic Relief Service. Sayyidna, thank you so much for all your support, and please.
Thank you, Maurice. And thank you, Maurice and Peter, for all that you did to make this happen today. I know that it's part of your passion, and it's also been part of mine. Just a word before we open up in prayer. Before I was a priest, my field was health education. Back in the 70s, I could see the controversies back and forth about natural family planning and artificial contraception. I knew there was something wrong, even though I was not even religious at that time. I knew there was something wrong in college. And then when I read Pope Paul VI's Humanae Vitae in 1968, I saw a direct challenge, not to women, but to men, and to everyone, to respect the natural fecundity, the natural humanity, the natural beauty of woman. And I felt for the first time, this is an opportunity for the church to speak. And so I've always wanted to see a day like today happen. And it was because of Maurice and Peter and Monsignor Jim and this NR Pro-Life, active pro-life committee in the eparchy, and also twinning with the Diocese of Brooklyn that made this happen. So thank you for all for being here. I was asked why we're doing it here. First of all, Church of Our Lady, the month of Our Lady. And third, Our Lady for all ladies. And us men, we can learn plenty by just respecting and honoring the women in our lives. And so this is a gift for you ladies, and it's a gift for us to learn how to better understand the mystery of woman, the beauty of woman. And so let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we ask for your blessing upon our doctor, upon our listeners, and upon everybody who partakes by video or what other means of communications there are. May this evening be redound to your glory and be for our good and our salvation. We ask you to bless this time and bless our hearts and minds, that we can throw away our artificial pearls and put on our pearl real bracelet. And may Almighty God bless us in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, this event is co-sponsored by the Eparchy of St. Marion and by the School of Evangelization of the Diocese of Brooklyn. Bishop DiMarzio is not able to be with us, but we have two representatives of the School of Evangelization. Christian Rada, who's the coordinator of Marriage, Family Life, and Respect Life Education for the Diocese of Brooklyn, and Ted Moscow, the Executive Director for the School of Evangelization. And Christian will say a word on behalf of Bishop DiMarzio.
Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Christian Rada. I'm the coordinator of Marriage, Family Life, and Respect Life Education. That's a mouthful. Bishop says I'm young, so I can have all that stuff to do. Just a little joke. On behalf of Bishop DiMarzio and Ted Musco for the School of Evangelization, I just want to thank you for coming here tonight and being an active voice for natural family planning. We live in a world that, people hear natural family planning and they run away, even though it's natural. I can tell you that it is part of the bishop's intentive and mission that to promote natural family planning. We are currently having multiple webinars that are teaching natural family planning to couples, and we're hoping that one of these seminars can be an aid for not just for Brooklyn and Queens, but for all over. So I want to again thank you all for coming here tonight.
And now I'm going to introduce our keynote presenter. Dr. Paul Carpentier and Nurse Jamie Hutchinson and the Catholic Health Services of Long Island worked to successfully open over a year ago the new Gianna Center for Women's Health and Fertility at Good Samaritan Hospital in Long Island. He was one of the first family physicians who were trained in nanotechnology, and he was honored with the International Award for Outstanding Medical Consulting in Natural Family Planning. Obstetrics and family medicine resident as well as women healthcare have gone to him asking him for his consultation and for his medical care. He was actually honored when he was in Worcester by the Diocese of Worcester. They conferred on him the Mother Teresa Pro-Life Award for his 25 years of pro-life women efforts in the diocese. And he was the president of the American Academy of Fertility Care Professionals, and he serves on the board of directors of the International Institute for Restorative Reproductive Medicine. He graduated from St. Louis University School of Medicine with honors in high-risk obstetrics and medical ethics. He and his wife Susan are parents to 4 professional young men. And finally, he served as a clinical consultant to the National Center for Women's Health and Fertility and has encouraged the development of new Gianna centers across the country. And he is currently the director of the Gianna Center in Long Island. And we have Jamie Hutchinson, his nurse practitioner here. Dr. Paul Carpentier, please. We're looking forward to your presentation. I'm so grateful you're able to be with us tonight.
Wonderful. Let's hear from Maurice for setting this up. Maurice talked about learning to appreciate women's fertility. And I think that's what our culture needs so badly. We need to heal the culture. And all of you here are part of that mission of healing the culture. These are my 4 boys in the background, oldest on the left, youngest on the right, and we're at Peter's wedding. Peter here and his bride Jackie this past summer here on Long Island became married, even though we're from Massachusetts, because she is from West Islip. And it's God graces that Bishop Murphy brought me to Long Island, centered me in West Islip, where our future in-laws were located. So we got extra graces at the same time that we followed God's plan in our lives. And I just bring this up because here's our future daughter-in-laws, and we would hope that these young men respect them for who they are, made in God's image and likeness, as women as they are as men. And that is just such a beautiful thing, and as our bishop said, it's really getting to the heart of authentic feminism, to respect us for how we are made. And our next slide is something that when I teach pre-marriage couples, this is a disposition, this is a frame of mind that we need to have when it comes to our fertile ground and the harvest, but also the fertility that's within us, together as a couple. A woman cannot be truly fertile bringing a new person into the world. Neither can a man by himself. It's only together. And we would say, the reason we use the word procreation instead of reproduction, zebras reproduce, ants reproduce, but humans procreate, because there's a third person. And you can see our artist is helping us to keep that in mind. And of course, the bowed heads in appreciation for how we are made and what we are given. The gift of our fertility. The gift of the fertility of the earth. And so we need to come to this appreciation. But I ask you, how can we appreciate something that we do not understand? If we went to some Aborigine community in Australia and talked about Jesus, and we said, oh, we appreciate him so much, they would have to say, first tell me about him so that I can appreciate him. So if we say we need to appreciate our fertility, but we don't understand our fertility, then we're beating a drum that has no understanding to it. And so my point is that our fertility care practitioners are the people that help us to understand, and then we can begin to appreciate. And Jamie, and Alicia, and Maurice, and so many other people are practitioners bringing that understanding to our communities. Then we can appreciate it. Once we appreciate something, we can respect it. And once we respect ourselves, then we would expect others to respect us, such as a young man in high school looking towards a young lady. If she doesn't understand and appreciate and respect herself, she's not going to expect that respect from him. So it all starts with understanding our fertility, and that's what we're here to teach you tonight. So there are many systems of monitoring a woman's cycle. And now there are actually hundreds of apps. And the apps do not teach you about your cycle. They're just a way to record your cycle. So the apps need to be thought of as third line or fourth line kind of recording systems. Instead, the person-to-person that you would get with the Creighton model. And yes, it can be done by Skype, but much preferably to be done in person. because this fertility care practitioner is not only teaching you about your ovaries and your pituitary, but she's teaching you about your relationships and being respected for who you are. Naprotechnology is, so to speak, the child of the Creighton Model fertility care system. Once Dr. Hilgers and his team, and I'll show you a picture of Dr. Hilgers in a minute, once they developed the Creighton Model, they came to realize that women's health problems were being manifested in their charting. Whether it was polycystic ovary, they have a classic appearance in their charting. Infertility patients had like A, B, and C forms of manifestations, and so on. You'll see some of those reflected here. Creighton Model was developed at Creighton University because that's where the Pope Paul VI Institute is. The Pope Paul VI Institute was named after Pope Paul VI because of Humanae Vitae. This beautiful document, probably 25 pages, that the bishop referenced, that changed my life and my wife's life and our boys. And it's just so beautiful. The world and the media responding to this, and many bishops, unfortunately, responding to this, said, this is saying no to contraception. And I always clarify, this was not saying no to contraception, this was saying yes to aspects of our relationships that are good for us. Once you understand what's good for us, then you'd say, contraception? Why would you want to do that? There's a doctor, a friend of mine in Massachusetts, and a teenager, she's a family doctor, when a teenager asks her for contraceptives, she screams and backs up. I won't scream at this, make you jump, but she screams and backs up because, why would you want to do such a thing? And the child is like, well, everybody's doing it, why are you coming down on me? So Humanae Vitae encouraged Dr. Thomas Hilgers and his team to form not only the Pope Paul VI Institute, but to go further and develop the Creighton Model fertility care system, which was a ratification of the Billings method. Dr. John and Lynn Billings in Australia developed the Billings method, and it was the first on the scene. And so, of course, when you have a new scientific method, first someone's got to prove that they were right. And that's what they started to do at the Pope Paul VI Institute. And then, as I said, that led to the offspring, so to speak, called naprotechnology, which I'll teach you about. So it was a response to the challenge of Humanae Vitae. If you read Humanae Vitae, the last few pages say, I challenge men of science to develop a further understanding of women's cycles so that we can bring that to the clinical practices. We can bring that to the research world and improve upon our understanding. It also challenged bishops and it challenged the laity to respond to these things. I'll be talking about Humanae Vitae, but also Donum Vitae, the gift of human life, and how that is saying, if you understand the gift, why would you want to put it in a petri dish? And then these others I won't talk about today, but they're beautiful, beautiful teachings, and of course the Catechism is a quick reference. Use the index, ask yourself a question, find it in the index, go to the paragraph, and it's all right there, so easy. Those are our guiding documents. And this is me. I thought I was going to be a marine biologist on Jacques Cousteau's team, but God had other plans. So let's learn a little bit about the Creighton Model fertility care system. Is it a method of contraception? No, far from it. It's to teach a woman each and every day whether she can achieve a pregnancy or not. And she can develop a respect for that power, that opportunity to bring a new life into the world. So it's not contraception, it's actually a system of family building. So natural family planning is respect for God's plan, respect for our human fertility, and how he chose to bring life into the world. Dr. Janet Smith, a great theologian now at Notre Dame, says God could have had life come into the world however he wanted. He chose this way. We need to learn from that. So fertility is good. Unfortunately, many gynecologists in the world think fertility is not good, and many population control people think it's not good. There is the opportunity within this method of total self-giving as a sacrifice, self-sacrificial giving. And isn't sacrifice a good thing when it's directed in the right way? Yes, there's marital bonding, and when you have self-sacrifice and marital bonding linked together, the divorce rate is so low. And it respects natural moral law, which we will get into maybe if we have time. Contraception, on the other hand, shows no respect for God's plan, no respect for human fertility. The words itself means against conception, and it reminds me of a book called Blessed Are the Barren. It's the ideas of Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger took Blessed Are the Barren to another level as far as who should be barren. That's another topic. It allows for instant gratification, or the focus to be on pleasure. The focus to be on the pleasure part and avoiding the pregnancy. And with that, the poor old ladies, they would say, I think I'm not really a partner in this, but I think I'm the source of your pleasure. That means I'm being used. And using persons went out with the 13th Amendment when we get rid of slavery. We need to be respected as persons, not used. And of course there's side effects to these, but there's benefits to these. Okay, so that's a quick summary. Furthermore, we could say, is it the rhythm method? Is it the rhythm method, natural family planning? And this is true. The rhythm method is like maybe one of the first methods of natural family planning, but you'll see some differences in a few minutes. So let's find out what those differences are. So I'm jumping ahead to part 6. I'm giving you the condensed version of something that I teach deacons, for instance. So I'm brought into deacon training programs. So here's a schematic of the woman's reproductive system. When I was in med school, all that we were taught about the cervix was that that's where you do a pap smear, and that it's the muscle that holds the baby in for 9 months. As the baby expands within the womb here, as the baby expands and the womb is getting very heavy and starting to contract, the cervix has to be very, very strong and resist those contractions. That's it. That's med school 101, 202, 303. That's all of it. That's all we learned. But there's a doctor named Dr. Odeblad in Sweden who spent his life's work studying these cervical crypts, which is going to be the basis of much what we talk about today. Of course, there's the ovary on each side. The ovary is about as big as your thumb, 250,000 eggs in each ovary, so to speak, and the delicate fallopian tubes that are easily damaged by chlamydia and gonorrhea and by endometriosis. Endometriosis is like the plague for Jamie and Alicia and I. We can talk about that. And it might have a very easy solution called vitamin D, but that's jumping ahead. So the scientific foundations of human fertility. How can we tell on the outside of our bodies what's happening on the inside of our ovaries? And what influences ovarian function? Being up studying for final exams is one. How can that influence my ovary function? The ovary here is depicted an entire month's cycle. You have follicles that are waiting to be called. And once they're called, they will start to develop. One follicle, maybe two, start to develop. They do not move around the ovary as depicted here. That all happens in one area. But what you have before you is a schematic of what happens in a 1 month time. What is it that calls the follicle to go forward is the pituitary gland. Way up here in the brain, sends a message through the bloodstream, down through the bloodstream. It's called FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, causes the follicle to start to grow. Believe it or not, insulin is very much involved in this. And that's the deficit with people with polycystic ovarian syndrome. The insulin molecule doesn't work with its receptor very well, and she never gets, or seldom gets, mature follicles. Instead, the follicles are stuck at one of these early stages. And so we can help her to get to a mature follicle and then achieve a pregnancy through the process of ovulation. After ovulation, the corpus luteum develops, and it makes this very precious hormone, my favorite hormone, called progesterone. Before they identified progesterone around 1950, they knew that it existed from animal studies and other revelations in the human body, they knew that there was a hormone that they needed to find that supported pregnancy. They said, when we find it, we're going to call it progestation. Progesterone means good for pregnancy. Because they knew when the progesterone dropped, the pregnancy would fail. New studies just out this year show that the progesterone needs to be there before implantation. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So here is progesterone being made, but as you see, it does not happen until the time of ovulation. Then progesterone comes up, and it needs to plateau for about 10 days. And it's during that time that the baby will be implanting into the wall of the uterus. The progesterone is very important for the wall of the uterus. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture, but blood vessels reaching out to feed the baby at the lining of the womb, that inner lining of the womb. Those blood vessels depend on progesterone to do their job and to actually relinquish oxygen to the baby. Progesterone is necessary for that. Many of the people that come to us at the Gianna Center, their progesterone levels come up about like here and then go down like this. And not only does that lead to a failure of pregnancies, but it leads to premature birth down the road if they survive long enough. And it leads to PMS symptoms. Progesterone being lower than estrogen causes PMS symptoms, irritability, trouble focusing, trouble concentrating, trouble with memory, trouble sleeping, breast soreness, bloating feeling in the pelvis. All of these things are from the progesterone being too low. How do doctors treat PMS these days? Antidepressants, antipsychotics even sometimes, sedatives, addictive things like Ativan and Xanax and things like this. They say, we'll calm you down. It's like, it's not a personality defect. It's a lack of progesterone. Give the poor lady some progesterone, and then her brain will know what to do with it. And her pituitary will know. And if she has plenty of progesterone, her next cycle will work better. And so often, that's all it takes for these ladies that are having infertility or recurrent miscarriages, just to give them some extra progesterone. Very safe thing to do. Bioidentical means it matches perfectly with their own, it is their own progesterone. Estrogen, this is how the doctors usurp the endocrine system of the woman. They give her high levels of drugs that are very potent and match with some of the estrogen receptors in her body, and that shuts off things. The progesterone encourages things, high levels of estrogen shut them off, and that's what's in the birth control pills. And this is dangerous. This can cause migraine headaches, can cause depression, can cause strokes, blood clots, pulmonary embolism, liver cancers, and so on. We'll see a slide about that. So messing with high levels of estrogen shuts things down and causes problems. Here's the manifestation now of how her ovaries are working. Each one of these across here is a day 1, day 2, day 3 of her cycle. We call day 1 of her cycle the first day of bleeding. The first day of bleeding, we would label that as day 1. And then she describes it for us very succinctly. Heavy. Next day, heavy. Next day, medium, medium, light. So here's 5 days of bleeding. Some days, some women it's 7 days, some women it's 9 days or more. But normally it would be something like 5 to 8 days. Here she tells us that she's not seeing any more bleeding and she's not seeing any cervical mucus. So she labels it with a green sticker. But once she starts to see some cervical mucus, which I'll teach you about, she labels that with this white baby sticker, meaning I have the potential of achieving a pregnancy today. Each and every day she knows. Each and every day she knows. So when you talk about being pro-choice, it's like, would you choose to have a pregnancy or would you not? There's your pro-choice. It's not later killing an innocent human being. It's pro-choice now. And this mucus unfolds, it develops, and she can tell that it's developing, and it's a manifestation of those, I'm going to go back a slide, manifestation of these higher levels of estrogen cause a difference in her mucus. And with people like Jamie and Alicia, they are taught how to observe these things and respond to them and understand them. Then after ovulation, which she labels as her peak day, I don't have time to define that, but the progesterone comes on the scene, and progesterone dries up cervical mucus. This is the gateway for sperm to get to the fallopian tube. Once ovulation takes place, there's no need for anything to get up towards the fallopian tube. So progesterone dries up that mucus. Here's the combination of the two findings put together. The black bars are her estrogen levels. And you see that the estrogen rises way up above 40 at times. We're hoping for more than 250, or in this description it would be 25. We're hoping for more than 25. And that is a mature follicle. And it's manifested by excellent cervical mucus. This cervical mucus is evident to her at the opening of the vagina. When she simply wipes with toilet paper, she's taught what to observe on the tissue and the meaning of that and the description of that. 10 kL AD. That's prime time fertility. 0 AD means nothing all day. Didn't see any cervical mucus. And she continues her observations very carefully, and she's learning from them, and so is the doctor, able to glance at this and see how well her ovaries are working. The progesterone levels are manifested here, and they do the drying up phase like we spoke about. So maybe some of us in the audience understand this already, but I wanted to take some time so that we're all on the same page. So can we use this information for family planning? Yes, of course. If the mucus is there, you can achieve a pregnancy. If it's not there, you cannot achieve a pregnancy. And how about the rhythm method? Why doesn't that work so well? It's because people's cycles vary in length from short cycles to long cycles. But notice the shaded area here. The day of ovulation is always preceded by cervical mucus. So whether she's having a long cycle or a short cycle, if she's paying attention to the cervical mucus, it can be used as a method of family planning. The rhythm method was guesstimates, calendar-like guesstimations based on her past 3 cycles. Well, the cycles vary. This is not just 3 different women. This is the same woman, 3 different types of cycles. And you'll see that right here. This is our Creighton model lingo, as you've just learned. And so in this cycle, the time till ovulation was 14 days. In this cycle, it was only 9 days. And in this cycle, it was 20 days. So the rhythm method would say, well, you can probably count on the first 8 days being infertile. In this cycle, the first 8 days would have brought about a baby, God willing, because she had cervical mucus right here, evident at the end of her menses and the next several days afterwards. Sperm can live 5 days in the cervical mucus. She ovulated here on day 9, so any intercourse, either day 9, 8, 7, 6, or 5, could have conceived a baby, potentially. So the rhythm method, maybe that's why some of us are in this room. And another feature that's evident here is the length of the post-ovulation phase, 14 days, 15 days, 13 days. You notice that it's very repetitive. It's very dependable, or it should be. People that's not are high risk of miscarriage. And I'll show you that in a minute. Here's a couple that's trying to achieve a pregnancy. The eyes indicate intercourse. So here, during a fertile day, they chose to have intercourse, and the next day she ovulated. There was intercourse again the day after, and her period didn't start. And it still didn't start, and it still didn't start. And so she ran a pregnancy test. Any of Jamie's patients or Alicia's patients would know that they were pregnant over here. They didn't have to wait way over here. And in fact, oftentimes they're pushing the limit and calling us with pregnancy tests over in here. So that's the method being used to achieve a pregnancy. So as I said, here it is in writing, sperm without mucus die within hours, but sperm with good mucus can live 3 to 5 days. This is the essence of family planning right here. Now, we're focusing in on that cervix, where I showed you the bigger picture with the womb above, the womb would be up here, and the cervix and the vagina down here. And now we get to see the glands that are here. Oftentimes they're called crypts. These are the glands that make the mucus in response to estrogen, and they'll change the mucus production in response to progesterone. With progesterone, it's plug-like. The sperm are trapped in the vagina. They cannot enter even into the cervix, never mind into the womb and the fallopian tube. They need to be in the fallopian tube to achieve a pregnancy. They need to be there when the egg is released. But with progesterone around, they can't enter. The vagina is very acidic, and so the sperm will die within 2 hours. You don't need spermicides. And if there is mucus, probably they'll have a chance of getting into the mucus and hiding there from the spermicide, potentially. Estrogen-like mucus, though, is really neat. It makes me think of the streets of New York City, and I'll tell you why. These protein fibers are spaced just wide enough for the normal head of the sperm. The normal sperm. Sperm are created without regard to quality control. Crank them out, millions of them. Doesn't matter quality, because I, God, the Creator, said, I'm going to make really cool cervical mucus that's going to filter out the abnormal sperm. So just crank them out by the millions, and I'll do the filtering over here, God says. So a normal sperm goes forward. A sperm with a large head, maybe carrying extra chromosomes, who wants that to fertilize your egg? Extra chromosomes, no thank you. How about a sperm with 2 heads? How about a sperm with multiple tails? They can't get in. But how about a sperm with a small head? It's going to be like a Volkswagen, a race car. It's going to race past the normal sperm. The answer is no, it will not, because of something called Brownian motion. God knew about Brownian motion before we discovered it. Brownian motion means that those small-headed sperm can move anywhere they want. They are not directed forward, but like the streets of New York City and a Cadillac on the streets of New York City, it can't turn around, right? It's going in one direction, and that's the direction it's stuck going. And that's the same for the normal sperm, if you follow what I'm saying. With IUI is the unofficial doctors saying, give me the sperm, I'm going to put it in a syringe, I'm going to put a cannula on my syringe and jam the cannula up through the cervix and squish my syringe so that all the sperm end up in the womb. Now that you know about filtering the sperm, who wants to do IUI? We just gave the abnormal sperm an advantage to get to the fallopian tube. And they'll say, oh, we washed it. Well, nobody can explain to me what they do when they're washing the sperm. I don't think it's as good as the cervical mucus. This is to reassure people that are saying, well, this can't really be reliable. Well, it's like, excuse me? Here is ovulation defined or identified by ultrasound. Here's intercourse. There was no mucus on this day. Even though ovulation was 48 hours later, they did not achieve a pregnancy. Here's intercourse. The very next day, she had clear, stretchy mucus. Excellent stuff. Very fertile type mucus. But the day that they had intercourse, there was none of that. Ovulation was documented here. Sperm can live up to 5 days in that mucus, but they did not achieve a pregnancy because this mucus wasn't there the day they had the intercourse. Okay? And here, get a load of this one, there was intercourse the day before ovulation and the day after, and yet they did not achieve a pregnancy because she did not have any cervical mucus. This might be one of my infertility patients. So here's the success rates with Creighton model fertility care. Almost 2,000 couples were enrolled in this study. The study was done in these 5 different cities in the United States. They monitored the couples for a total of 17,000 months. And the effectiveness of the method at avoiding pregnancy was 99.5%. When you take into account error on the hands of the teachers or error in the hands of the beholders, the people that are going to use the method, it was 96.8%. Both of these are better than the birth control pill at avoiding pregnancy. So to summarize that slide, I know it was a kind of busy slide, the effectiveness to avoid a pregnancy of 99.5% means that if there were 1,000 couples that used the method for 1 year, there would only be 5 unexpected pregnancies. Okay? So this sort of is appreciation of how we're created. You're given reason and wisdom, and we're given fertile phases that we can count on because they're fairly reliable and that cervical mucus is identifiable. This is a chart of a woman who's breastfeeding. And if she was to achieve a pregnancy, the only possible chance of achieving a pregnancy would be on the days of mucus, and she can see those days of mucus. Few and far as they are, as long as she's monitoring the mucus, then she can tell, and she can choose to avoid a pregnancy if that's the couple's goal. Temperature, basal body temperature, will come up after ovulation, but it's only after ovulation. So in this case, here's her actual first day of ovulation. There were several days of mucus, like the ovary was trying to get the act going, but here was her day of ovulation. It was only going to be about here that her temperature would rise. And what you know about cervical mucus is how can you rely on temperature to avoid a pregnancy? If you have intercourse here and then your temperature rises here, you say, I got news for you, husband, we could be pregnant. So temperature is only after the fact. So especially in the case of breastfeeding, you really need to pay attention to the cervical mucus. And that would be the Billings method, the Marquette model, the Creighton model. Symptothermal also pays attention to the mucus, but also the temperatures. And then 14 days after she ovulated, there was her first period. She could also predict her first period. She could see it happening. So this leads to sort of a congratulatory book and a wake-up call to physicians saying there's a revolution going on, unleashing the power of the woman's cycle. Dr. Hildreth wrote this book, and he's saying these women are appreciating the understanding that we're able to give them and the applications of this. So, the fertility care system is for you. This is Maurice's slide, I'm borrowing. Kathy Rivet's slide via Maurice. Kathy Rivet has trained so many people across the world, actually. The system is for you if you have regular cycles, but also if you have irregular cycles. You don't need regular cycles to depend on the method. If you're interested in family planning rather than contraception, if you're looking for couple involvement and shared responsibility, that's a beautiful thing. Teamwork. If you're looking for a method that respects life, if you're looking for a method that follows church teaching. But also, this is where naprotechnology comes in, if your body's not working well. And now we're going to turn towards that. So what is the effectiveness of the Creighton model to achieve a pregnancy in couples with normal fertility? So far we've been talking about avoiding pregnancy. Look how powerful it is. In the first cycle of trying to achieve a pregnancy, 76% of couples will achieve successfully. Our system is working very well. The third cycle, by the third cycle, 90% have. So that means only 10% are left after 3 cycles of trying. So if you think you might be having a fertility problem, chart your cycles. Within 3 months you'll know. You can be 90% sure that I do have a fertility problem because we should have achieved by now. But what do the doctors say? They say, come back and see me in 12 months. Why? Because their studies without these kind of systems say it takes 12 months of random acts of intercourse to achieve pregnancy reliably. 12 months to be 90% sure. We can be 90% sure in 3 months. So start charting your cycles, and you'll be exposed to these beautiful teachers that will teach you more than family planning. These biomarkers will help us to understand your infertility, will help us to understand why you have PMS and repeated miscarriages and ovarian cysts. Ovarian cyst surgery is sort of like tonsillectomy used to be. Everybody had, when I was my age, everybody was having the tonsils out. This day and age, everybody's having the ovarian cysts out. And they haven't fixed the underlying problem, so 2 months later you got another ovarian cyst. Good for me if I'm a surgeon. Don't print that. So the ovarian cysts are happening because the pituitary and ovary are sort of dysfunctional in their communication. They don't need to have surgery, they need to have the communication fixed, in most cases. But just like tonsillectomy, some people need a tonsillectomy. Some people need an ovarian cyst operated on. This is true. So this leads to naprotechnology, natural procreative technology. And this is Dr. Hilgers. And he describes his method as a science which devotes its medical, surgical, and allied health energies and attention to cooperating with the natural procreative systems. Cooperating with it. So using the best of medical science in a way that cooperates with our body. Then, for couples with infertility, applying naprotechnology, we can solve up to 80% of the infertility problems. Simply, a couple that has infertility learning the Creighton model system, 20 to 40% of them can achieve a pregnancy. Who knows how many people get pregnant with IVF? Or, let me say the words this way. If you're infertile and you're going to go to IVF, the chance of you achieving a pregnancy is what percentage? Very low. Good. Good. An educated group. Most people would say, oh, it's broadcast all over CBS News, and so it must be good. It must be at least 80% successful. The answer is 35% successful. And that's with 3 cycles of trying, $19,000 each. Thank you very much. Okay? And how many embryos are lost? We'll find out in a minute. So 35% success rate. You can get that with Alicia and Jamie charting your cycles. Not to mention a doctor helping out. Okay, I don't mean to make light of infertility. It's serious stuff, and we're going to talk about that coming up. So the chart, Dr. Hilgers found out the chart is leading to certain understandings of what's going on in the body. So this young lady has only 1 day of cervical mucus, and in fact, in that day, she only had 1 time that she saw any cervical mucus across 30 days. How many hours in 30 days? And only 1 time did she see cervical mucus. Potentially, with the Creighton model, if she identified that, she'd say, hey, today's the day for intercourse. But otherwise, it's like doing something in Las Vegas, taking chances, rolling the dice, so to speak. But there's a reason for that. Her ovary probably is not making much estrogen. In this case, it takes 8 days for the baby to get from the ovary to the uterus. 8 days. And what's happening on day 6 in this woman is her menses starting. So the baby is arriving to the womb after her menses has already started. The baby barely stands a chance. And there's a high chance of miscarriage if she does achieve. And this woman probably has very low progesterone. And this lady has low progesterone. How do I know? She's having spotting for 5 days before her period even starts. New studies out of Harvard confirm our importance of this. They've shown that even 2 days of spotting before the period starts is a sign of low progesterone and a sign that she's at high risk of miscarriage and potentially, not proven yet, but potentially a higher chance of breast cancer and abnormal bleeding. Any doctor hearing this kind of story, the typical doctor is going to give the person the birth control pill. He says, I'll give you cycles. He's not giving cycles. He's making a bleeding pattern happen every 28 days. It's not a true menstrual cycle. All right, so here's the Gianna Center. The Gianna Center, we have one in Manhattan, the first one. It's called the National Gianna Center. I'm sorry, I'm trying not to do anything. The National Gianna Center is here in Manhattan, the first one. There were other naprotechnology practices around the United States, but we noticed that there needs to be a name recognition. So we named it after St. Gianna Molla. You've maybe heard of her story where she found herself pregnant with a uterine problem, a problem of the womb. And the doctors recommended that she have an abortion so that they could take out the womb or treat with whatever they needed to do. This is in Italy, not too long ago. This was around 1960. And she said, no, you take care of my baby, and whatever you can do for me, you do for me. Okay, so out of respect for St. Gianna, and many, many prayers to St. Gianna, Dr. Ann Nolte created the Gianna Center in Manhattan. And Bishop Murphy, hearing about the beautiful things that are happening in Manhattan, said, I've got millions of people out in Manhattan, out in Long Island, that hate driving into Manhattan. And so let's try to get an napro doctor down here. And I was up in Massachusetts doing this for 25 years, so he recruited me down here. It's good for infertility, menstrual cycle problems, endometriosis, PMS symptoms, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and many other things, including ladies that are entering the menopause. Important time where we can still respect their fertility and their hormones as God had created them. And we have natural family planning education. Now, the brand name of Gianna, maybe think of it like McDonald's. All right, if I'm hungry and I'm in a foreign town, I think maybe there's a McDonald's. I don't advocate for McDonald's, I'm just using their name. They're very not pro-family. So Gianna represents this, a center that follows the ethical and religious directives of the USCCB, U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, has a Creighton model trained and certified fertility care practitioner who teaches Creighton model, has an naprotechnology doctor, and supports crisis pregnancies. Okay, so it has those four things. It might have other things. It might support the Billings method. Great. Symptothermal teachers. Great. But we have to have those four things. Okay? So that's the name recognition of the Gianna Center. And there's currently 9 of them scattered around the United States. There's, I think, 4 or 5 in New York, 2 in New Jersey. They're starting one up in Connecticut. They're starting one up in New Hampshire, one in Louisiana, and Michigan keeps hemming and hawing about it. Advantages: it's safe. It's a shared system between the spouses. It respects the dignity of marriage and woman. It's natural and cooperative. It's proven reliable. And our speakers that are going to follow me, nice ladies that are willing to talk about this, spice. You're going to learn about spice and how it helps their relationships. So what's the contrary, what's the counter distinction? Contraception. Pope Paul VI in Humanae Vitae predicted that as contraception is launched, there's going to be an increase in divorce, an increase in single-parent families, an increase in child abuse, and a general lowering of society's morality. Here's truth be told. Humanae Vitae was what year? 1968. Excellent. Right here. Okay? So here's the number of abortions per year preceding 1968. The contraceptive pill, believe it or not, let me tell you a little quick standby, was built in Worcester, Massachusetts in 1960. Guess who was born in Worcester, Massachusetts in 1960? So I'm as old as the birth control pill. So in 1960, the birth control pill came on the scene, and as the use of the birth control pill increased, as its prevalence in society increased, so did abortion follow that. So you have these Planned Parenthood type people, pro-choice people, whatever you want to label, that are saying if you don't like abortions, then you should spread contraception. It's the exact opposite. They know, the leaders at Planned Parenthood know, the more the contraception is used, the more it's likely to fail. The more it fails, the more people will look for abortion, and the more money we would make. In fact, the condoms that they pass out are the weakest condoms on the market. That sort of shows you where they're headed. Okay? And then once the birth control pill was prevalent, that everybody that wanted it had it. The abortions also leveled off. And they're coming down, thank goodness, but I don't think it's because of the birth control pill. Now here is the other thing that Pope Paul VI mentioned in 1968, that as contraception advances in prevalence, divorce is going to follow. And sure enough, the same thing happened. Prior to that, the divorce rate, and then after contraception, it moved up towards 50% or so. And finally, children living in a dual parent family, children living in a single parent family. So I summarize this effect on our society with a slide from Star Wars. Everybody know Star Wars, and Han Solo, and Chewbacca and all that stuff? Well, there's a scene in Star Wars where they were trying to escape the stormtroopers and they dove down the chute and they ended up here. And there's a famous line that rings in my ears every time I think of these stats that I just showed you. And Han Solo says to the Princess Leia, he says, "What a wonderful smell you found." Makes me think of these artificial pearls. What a wonderful artificial environment you've created for yourself. Look at the gunk that's happening all around us. And you've led us to this. How are we going to get out of this? So, let our brain go to peace. Let me get off of my high horse and get back to something else that Pope Paul VI predicted. Coercion by governments, and we see the Chinese government, one-child policies and forced abortions. And I've talked with many people from China about this and how devastating it is, not just to the woman, but to the family and to the entire village. He said, we're going to see bodies become like machines, and we have surrogate pregnancies and things like that, and less respect for women, and less respect for marriage, and a general lowering of morality. Other problems that aren't mentioned in Humanae Vitae are also becoming evident. Here we are going to celebrate next year our 50th anniversary of Humanae Vitae, and we're finding out that an increase in breast cancer is attributed to the birth control pill. There's a 44% increase in breast cancer for women who use the birth control pill before their first pregnancy. This reminds me of Portland, Oregon, where these young ladies had a pact that they would become pregnant before graduation. And so the school board says, that's it, we got to get everybody on the birth control pill. When you know this kind of information, that's scary. And so the doctors say, no, 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 no. Carpentier is giving you a bias, it's untrue. Well, they are citing a study in Lancet. Lancet is the medical journal from Britain, the most prestigious one in Britain. And it said that, no, we don't cause an increase in breast cancer. And go ahead and use it for all the things that you like using it for, doctors. It doesn't cause an increase in breast cancer, don't worry about it. But not only does it increase the chance of breast cancer, it has the potential to be abortifacient by thinning the lining of the uterus so that baby that is potentially achieved can't implant. Abortifacient means it facilitates abortion. People think, well, it shuts off the ovary. Only if you have high doses of estrogen, which, as we said, are very dangerous to the liver, migraine headaches, blood clots. So they're trying to get away from using the estrogens, and instead they'll use progesterone-like drugs that aren't so dangerous. But here's the counter to the Lancet study from Britain. This is thanks to Dr. Chris Kallenborn, a friend of mine. He's in Pennsylvania, and he put his life in jeopardy to get the data that showed how they skewed the data to show that it didn't cause. They dropped all the people before their first pregnancy that were taking the birth control pill. They excluded them from the study. They studied only people after their first pregnancy. Well, when you study all comers, there's now been 23 more studies, and 21 out of 23 showed that there is, in fact, an increased chance of breast cancer. And in fact, we know that there is even after your first pregnancy, but it's a little bit smaller. It's maybe a 10 to 15% increased chance of breast cancer. All right, so now I'm going to do something I enjoy, and hopefully you will too. Get back to Humanae Vitae, just for quick reference. Remember that it's saying yes to aspects of our relationship that are good for us. A reminder. It's saying yes to full sharing, self-giving, total self-giving, a Jesus-like giving. When you're sharing your aspirations for your future, when you're sharing your skills and being able to be a breadwinner, that's great. When you're sharing your body totally, that's total self-giving. It's available to us through this beautiful design of marital intercourse, where it's spiritual, physical, intellectual, communicative, and emotional. And if you look at those, that's spice. So one of our speakers is going to teach us about spice. But I wanted to show you now, when we think about IVF and contraception, natural family planning and naprotechnology, when we contrast those, we're talking about Humanae Vitae and Donum Vitae. And Pope Benedict says that there's a harmony of these two documents. He says that we can never allow the dominion of technology to invalidate the quality of love and the sacredness of life. In other words, just because scientists can do it doesn't mean it's a wise thing to do. He goes on to say, this fundamental view of human life and procreation goes back to the creation of man, and thus represents a paradigm for all generations. It's a key part of natural law that deserves universal respect, not just respect of Catholics, respect of everyone, because it's part of how we're created. So Donum Vitae talks about that when it comes to generating new human beings. And I'm going to translate it for you into mathematics to be simple and concise and quick. Normal procreation, mom plus dad plus God. I tease my couples, I say, okay, who's going to take credit for the soul? Is it in the egg or in the sperm? Okay? So we need all three to bring a new person to the world. If anybody doubts it, like maybe a pregnancy patient, I say, you know, where did the soul come from? Is it from, or do you even have a soul? She says, of course I have a soul. Okay, where did it come from? Your mom or your dad? She says, I said, right, it came from God. So God has been there to help generate this new person. The Creator, who is love, is identifying the self-giving love of the two people and brings about a new person. So in infertility, there's a disorder which interferes with the normal process of conceiving or sustaining a pregnancy. If it's interfering with God's plan, you could call it evil. So with mom and dad and the disorder, even though they're trying to achieve a pregnancy, they lack a certain capability, and that leads to disappointment. So isn't it the job of doctors to figure out which disorder it is that's interfering and figure out the remedy for that so that they can bring about this new person? That's the job of medicine, is to figure these things out for the people. So naprotechnology does just that. It seeks out the underlying causes, repairs using current medical science. It's not some voodoo or something off the shelf in the back room or something. It's current medical science. It facilitates conception through that loving and self-giving action of the husband and wife. Helps them to conceive in their own bedroom. So, with regards to infertility conceptions, restored fertility means the disorder has been removed. So that's why I like the term, when I'm talking in academic medical centers, restorative reproductive medicine. Napro, procreation technology, they'll think, oh, that's Catholic, don't push that down my throat. I say, it's restorative reproductive medicine. Okay? As opposed to artificial reproductive technologies, which are bypassing. So here's a Boston College professor who was driving out to see me in the Worcester area, and she used to joke, she says, you know, I drove past 4 IVF centers to get here. And she was very diligent, she followed through, and achieved her son TJ. Now the most important word on this slide, in my opinion, is the smallest word. Then. Okay? So the naprotechnology comes first, and then mom, dad, and God participate in the act of creation, as opposed to IVF. IVF is in the midst of this, and this is what Donum Vitae points out. Who's choosing the sperm? Who's choosing the sperm donor? Who's choosing which egg meets which sperm? That's usually left up to God. And that beautiful cervical mucus. So IVF is more of a gamete harvest. Yes, of course they love each other and they're going through this and spending money on it, but it's bypassing their system. And I'm taught by our theologians and bishops that, yes, we respect that person that's created, that they would have a soul there at the moment of conception. And so it's a new person, and we respect that person. And I've used my talents to support pregnancies where the couple has, outside of my realm, achieved a pregnancy with IVF. I say, you have a pregnancy on board, I want to support that person, give him the best chance to make it into the world. But IVF in perspective is this: it separates the unitive from the procreative aspects of human intercourse. It is not bound to the union of husband and wife. It could be an NBA basketball player's sperm and an MIT graduate's egg in a body of a UConn basketball star. You could do any of these kind of things. It treats life as a commodity, and I hear that from my patients all the time that have been to the IVF centers. After failing IVF 3 or 4 times and IUIs 12 times, I say to them, why did they say you couldn't achieve a pregnancy? They said, they didn't say, it's unexplained. They said, we'll just make some more embryos. Make more embryos. That's treating life as a commodity. Just like when we go to buy a car, we might say, I'd like a red sporty vehicle with mag wheels and stereo speakers. Okay? So when you're thinking that way and you go after a human person, and then they say, do you want us to do pre-implantation genetic diagnosis? And you say, what? Say, we can test some cells and make sure it doesn't have cystic fibrosis, or make sure it's a boy or a girl. You know, you get to choose. And then later, when people get in that habit of thinking and they have a baby, and then the ultrasound that shows, oh, you have Down syndrome, or you have a baby that's probably going to have red hair, or you have a baby that's going to be prone to having more moles, or whatever it might be. It's like, oh my gosh, that's not a perfect baby. That's not what I ordered. Okay? So that's treating life as a commodity, as opposed to donum vitae, the gift of human life, the gift of the person and all their talents. So it's founded on abortion principles. You can't have people in a petri dish if you haven't already accepted abortion. That's too much of a risk to impose on a human person, unless you've accepted, oh, we can destroy perfectly healthy babies one day before they're born. So what's the big deal of having them in a petri dish? And it leads to embryonic cell lines and cloning, and you remember President George Bush saying, hey, stop making new cell lines. I don't want to wear you guys out. I want to get to our other speakers. I can show you more nanotechnology things, but let me try to wrap up. There's lots of people with infertility, and therefore there's a big enterprise that follows them. And it's only helping 0.5% of our infertility couples achieve a pregnancy. Remember that number. Only 0.5% of the people with infertility are helped by IVF. So it's not as successful as you might think. Instead, what's making you think that way is advertising. Hungry, you think Snickers bar. Infertility, you think IVF. This is a picture of ICSI, intracytoplasmic sperm infiltration. What they have here is an egg being held by a pipette with a very gentle suction on that pipette, holding this egg in place while they take a glass needle, very, very thin, thin as a hair, and you see this? That's a sperm inside. So somebody has selected a sperm from whichever donor and is implanting that into the egg. ICSI. With ICSI and with other IVF procedures, many embryos are formed, but you would be horrified to know, and please remember this number, if you're going to remember any numbers from this lecture, approximately 7 embryos are lost for every one that's born. 7 are lost, 7 siblings are lost for every one that's born. And that's only counting the ones that were transferred to the womb. There's many more that were left in the petri dish. And then they approach the parents and say, what do you want to do with these extra embryos? And I would say, extra embryos? Those are my children. What do you mean what do I want to do with them? I want to implant them, of course. I want to give them a chance. So is this embryo friendly? Is this baby friendly? Is this woman friendly? Is this marriage friendly? Instead, Dona Vitae, I'll give you this quote, and it's very powerful. A true and proper right to a child would be contrary to whose dignity and nature? To the mother, the father? It's contrary to the baby's dignity and nature. The child is not an object to which one has a right, like the 13th Amendment, nor can he be considered an object of ownership. Rather, a child is a gift, the supreme gift, and is a living testimony, an ongoing living testimony to the mutual giving of his parents. That's a child. That's the dignity of that child, and the dignity of marriage. So I can show you napper technology statistics. This is a buddy of mine in Ireland. He's much more handsome than I, and he's got an Irish brogue. And he's busier than I am because there was one of his earliest patients went on to the Irish equivalent of the Oprah Winfrey Show and said, I went and I spent my life savings at the IVF centers, and this guy gave me $15 of progesterone, and here's my baby. He had to close his family practice and just take care of infertility patients. It really took off. All right? So it's very successful. I'm going to just show you a couple examples, and that'll be it. What's missing? Cervical mucus. And in this cycle, this is the same woman. All these cycles are missing cervical mucus. But ultrasound studies showed that she was ovulating, but couldn't achieve a pregnancy. And down here, she started vitamin B6. We gave her some extra vitamin B6. And she had her first day of cervical mucus, just one observation, but she identified it, and they had intercourse that day, and here's an ultrasound picture of her baby. So like $10 of vitamin B6 as opposed to $19,000 in the IVF center. And it was with her husband in their own bedroom. Okay? Vitamin B6 is very important in the production of cervical mucus. This woman had been on the birth control pill, which shuts down cervical mucus, not just while you're on the pill, but even 18 months later. And she had human papillomavirus, so she needed to have her cervix frozen. Not only did it kill the abnormal cells from the human papillomavirus at the exit of her cervix, but the freezing went deep into her cervix, killing all those precious glands that you've just learned about, and she couldn't make much mucus. But identifying what was wrong, giving her the remedy, she achieved the pregnancy. Okay? So that's napper technology. It's also good, I'm going to stop here, it's also good for PMS symptoms, polycystic ovary. Let me jump to impressive slide right here, past it. Oops, why isn't it going backwards for me? Right here. The best polycystic ovary infertility treatment in the United States was considered to be Johns Hopkins University. Here's months of trying to achieve a pregnancy. Here's success rate, 50%, 60% success rate. And here's Dr. Hildreth's data. Okay? So the best in the country versus the unknown, beautiful napper technology, which includes surgery and medical interventions, more successful than Johns Hopkins. So in summary, in conclusion, you're going to hear women of their own words right now. I just want to say, fertility care difference is that it's nuptial and faith-filled, founded on total self-giving, a Jesus type of love, oriented toward long-term health and success, and a healing approach, not destructive or suppressive. So thank you for your attention. Some of these stories are summarized here in the back. There's many handouts for you to take. But I would highly recommend these two. This talks about the Gianna Center and what we do there. And this talks about two families that had no children. One was miscarrying over and over again. That's this lady. And she sought me out in Massachusetts. And now she's got 7 boys. And this lady just couldn't achieve a pregnancy. And she just called us to say she's pregnant with her 5th.
Girl.
Thanks for your attention.
We have 10 minutes for questions. If anyone has any questions for Dr. Helping to you, we have 10 minutes.
Yes, so thanks for your diligent attention, and I'm sorry I go so long, but I get excited and passionate about these things. And let's go ahead.
What's the therapeutic level?
The amount of B6, so in a normal vitamin you might get up to 50 milligrams, but we're using 500 in this case. So we're using it like a medication, not just replenish B6, but extra.
How helpful is technology for women who constantly get ectopic pregnancies?
Ectopic pregnancies. That's usually going to be something wrong with 2 things. The fallopian tube is damaged, so you want to repair it surgically. That can be done potentially through the womb, through the vagina, without making any incisions, but better probably to do a small incision, what's called laparoscopy, to fix the fallopian tube. And the second thing is, oftentimes the hormones are not up to par. The fallopian tube is not like a copper pipe. It's muscles and mucous membranes and circulation that's going through the fallopian tube, and that depends on the hormones. So if we improve the hormones, meaning the ovary function, and structurally fix the fallopian tube, we're more likely to have a pregnancy enter the womb. And in fact, thanks for bringing this up, because recent studies done by the Catholic Medical Association shows that it is more successful and less expensive to fix the fallopian tubes than to go to IVF. Less expensive and more successful. And the babies do better. With IVF, you have double the chance of birth defects. You have a double chance of premature birth. And you have, of course, a much higher rate of twins and triplets and quadruplets.
What's your take on computer-based methods like Clearblue and other sort of machines that are coming out of places like Europe with the urine dipstick?
So the latest thing that come out is the urine dipstick for progesterone, and that would confirm that you are past your days of fertility. It confirms that you're past. So for some people that might be valuable. The things like the LH detection kit, which is looking for the LH surge from the pituitary at the time of ovulation, so many infertility couples are being misled to use that. First of all, it's not reliable in an infertility couple. Secondly, if the LH surge is positive, it's too late to achieve a pregnancy. You need to have intercourse the days before the test became positive. Clearblue monitor is pretty cool. Clearblue monitor shows estrogen levels rising, and it watches for LH, and it says they're rising, get ready. And then the LH, and it says this is your day of ovulation likely. So that can be an adjunct to the charting that we see here. But it's been proven, and I've been arguing against this for almost 20 years now, including in public fora, that the Clearblue monitor doesn't work well in somebody whose ovaries are not working well. Okay? So it's relying on reliable cycles. And the woman whose ovaries aren't working well doesn't have reliable cycles. So the technology doesn't match up. It really needs a full-fledged approach to her infertility issues.
Now we're going to hear 3 witness talks from 2 married women and 1 single woman. And thank God it worked out that we were able to have married women and single women so that all women can be assured that this system is helpful for them, not only for family planning, but also to help them in their gynecological problems. The first witness talk will be given by Dorothy Dugande. Dorothy has been teaching the creative model for many, many years. She was actually my practitioner. She's the one who told me to chart my cycle. And I remember after my introductory session with her, the first session that I had with Dorothy when I came home, I remember waking up in the middle of the night, sitting in the bed, and saying to myself, God had brought me to the United States not to be just a chemistry teacher. He had much more for me to do, and one of the things I knew with so much confidence that night, that he wanted me to learn this and teach this message to all women. So I owe her a lot, and I have to thank her so much for all her help in putting this seminar together. Dorothy had helped in editing all the materials that you have in your folders, even the flyer. So many hours have been spent on the phone between me and Dorothy that Peter got to the point when he knows I'm having a phone call with Dorothy, he's like, okay, good night, it's 3 hours of phone call at that. So we were spending long hours at night working on editing all of that, and I'm very grateful for all her help. And she's going to give her own witness talk, and then she will introduce the next witness talk.
It's just a sheer pleasure to be here with you, and I thank Maurice so much for helping to do all this. She's the kind of person, her story too, where I walk the walk with people through their journeys, and that's what you're going to hear is personal stories, the witness stuff, the real stuff, the real people. Maurice is part of the real people. I walk the walk with her as a practitioner. I've been a practitioner for about 17 years, so I kind of feel like I'm getting a little older, but it's been a journey, and everybody has their story and their journeys, and I've had one. I often think of that movie Ghost. You ever seen that movie Ghost with Whoopi Goldberg? The guy dies and he's up in the spirit world and he's making things happen down on Earth. I kind of feel like that's what happened with Creighton in the New York area. When I in 1997 I started working for the St. Augustine Foundation in Yonkers, and I became like full-time advocate and marketer of natural methods of family planning. And it came from a passion of my mother had a fertility problem herself, and it just impassioned me and drove me as a single person to find solutions to help more women. And along my journeys, I had gotten trained in the method of family planning, and I was teaching it. In my journeys, I came across this priest, Father Daniel McCaffrey, and he kept saying to me, "You have to go check out that method. You have to go see that Creighton method." And I kept arguing with him, why? I'm already trained in the method. Why do I need to go do another one? I already paid the money. We can't pay more money to take another method. Oh, it's a Cadillac of NFP. You have to go see this method. So after a couple years, I said to my boss, would it be okay? Can I go out there in out west and take a look at that to shut up this priest? And he said, if you want to do that, go ahead, because I don't really care if you go or not. So I said, I'm going. I didn't know what I was going for. It felt like that guy up in the sky, moving people around, so there I was at the last minute, going to Missouri, because that's where the satellite program was at that time, that fit my schedule. And I went out and I took this program out there, and while I was out there watching the slides, like even some of the ones that Dr. Carpentier had, and I was like, wow, New York needs this, or women need this. This needs to be in New York. So I took the training, I came back, and I was a practitioner, the first one in practically the tri-state area. There were no other ones. There was no Gianna Center. And I had no doctor to work with me. So I had to convince women to go get their bioidentical progesterone up to Massachusetts, where Dr. Carpentier was. He was a newer nanotechnology doctor up there. And I had to have these discussions with women of why they need to go to Massachusetts to get progesterone. Then I had to start convincing some of the infertility couples why they should take a airplane trip out to Nebraska to get their infertility surgery. And it was like tug of war. Why do I need to do that? I got surgeons at NYU. I got really good. And I said, but he's doing the best of the best. He's got really great techniques. You got to go do this. I sent quite a few women out to Nebraska and a lot of women up to Massachusetts to get their progesterone. And finally, my boss was like, we need to get a doctor in New York City. We need a nanotechnology doctor here. And I was traveling the country begging them, somebody come to New York City. Finally, a doctor came to New Jersey. She got trained. And I was a new practitioner and she was a new doctor. And I just saw her office, and I remember the first time that I was in it. She had nothing in it. A doctor's office with bookshelves and no books. Nothing. Just a plain desk, not even anything on the desk. And she was embarking on this nanotechnology journey. And I just felt like I have to support her. And so my boss let me go down there 3 times a week to do administrative work in her office, to keep the office moving, get it going, and stuff like that. So while I was down there, I became one of her first patients without really knowing that I needed to be one. She had all the books that she got trained, and I was telling just casually that I had a very severe PMS problem, irritability, you know, and I just thought, I have to live with it, that's what it is, it's the way it is. And so she said, well, you know, she said, they do these blood tests, we can do this, I can order them for you. So I said, okay, go order them. So we did it, I charted my cycle, we ordered them, and the results come back, 0 progesterone practically, 0 estrogen, and I was like, and so Dr. Hilders out, they went out to Dr. Hilders in Nebraska, and he writes back, do them again, maybe it's a fluke, maybe it's a mistake. I said, I hope it is, I hope it is. So we did it again, we waited another month, we did it again. Took all the tests, they come back, same kind of levels. So I was like freaking out, what are you telling me I got premature menopause? I was like 38 years old, like, premature menopause, really? Really? So Dr. Hilders said, no, it's just a freak thing sometimes, he's not sure why it happens, but the hormone levels go to almost 0 levels. No wonder that the PMS was so bad. And so his solution was HCG injections 4 times a month. And I had to self-inject them. And I remember the first time trying to poke in my thigh. And I'm like, really? Really? And so I had to keep playing with it over the months to get it to a point where I could do it and it didn't hurt me. I was really good at it. It didn't feel it, nothing. So anyway, those injections boosted my natural levels of estrogen and progesterone to normal levels where I could function much better. And I just felt saved from natural technology, and I just felt like really on a mission, like we got to get this out there. More people need to know about it, even single women, not just married women, but single women. And so I was so indebted to that doctor, and I started to see of these natural technology doctors around the country. They're unusual, they're special people. They have the love of God in them. And I could feel that from this Dr. Leonie Watson, who's the one in New Jersey. She just like vibrated that to me, and I was just so grateful to have crossed her path. So that was kind of like how it personally helped me. And I'll bring another story. So then I started bringing satellite programs into New York City. We still have a training up in Connecticut. We do it twice a year to become a practitioner. So people don't have to travel out to Nebraska or far away to take these courses. And we've been doing that for now 14 years. It's just amazing how this has been. I've been able to watch it grow all around this area, the tri-state area, around the whole country, and even in the world. It's going into more and more countries. It's just been an amazing journey in a story. And in my own office, I was working in Yonkers. This woman came to me, and infertility is, I would say, it's very anguishing, and for me to walk with these couples and these women, it's a very painful thing. I've seen a lot of tears, but I've also seen a lot of joy. And this one woman came to me early in my career. I was only trained like 1 or 2 years, and I didn't realize till later on why God sent her into my office, but I saw it later on. She came to me after having 10 years of infertility, worked with Dr. Hilders long distance in Nebraska for 10 years, doing all the protocols he wanted, and she had a cancerous ovary that was removed. She had all kinds of hormone treatments, and after 10 years still was unable to get pregnant. And she came into my office with her husband, and she came in with 10 years worth of the charts that Dr. Carpenter had showed you, like 10 years of. So I had a big table, so we put the charts, I said put them out all over the table, and I felt so inexperienced and humbled, and said to myself, oh my gosh, what am I going to tell this woman who's had the best of the best, and still can't get pregnant, and she doesn't want to give up? And her husband was sitting in the corner practically. He had had enough. 10 years, he's done. It's like, stop it already. And she's like, I know God is going to give me a baby. I just know it. I know God's going to. And I'm sitting there like, really? Okay. So I'm looking at the charts, and I was just looking for loopholes. Maybe somebody missed something. Maybe she needs some more kind of vitamins. What else could I do? And she came several times, and then she stopped coming. And when women do that, a lot of times I let them go, because they've been through the system, and they've had enough and they're kind of telling me that. I don't pursue them anymore. I leave them alone. If they want to come back, they'll do it. So I let it go, and about almost a year later, it was around Christmas time. My office is kind of slow at Christmas with the NFP, and the phone rings, and it's her, and she's like, I have to tell you something. I said, what? And she's like, I'm pregnant. And literally, the phone almost like fell on the floor. I was like, what? What happened? What'd you do? And she's like, I stopped everything. I said, could you come in here? Could you come in here? I want to see the chart that you got pregnant. I want to see the cycle. I want to see what it looks like. Yeah, she's going to come in. But she didn't come in until she was about 8 months pregnant. And she came in, there's a big lobby there, and she was sitting in the lobby, but I went into the lobby to look for her, and I couldn't recognize her. Most women have a pregnancy glow, but this woman had like an unusual radiating glow. I didn't recognize her at all. And when she told me who she was, I was like, serious? I was like, whoa, whoa. So then she told me too that the Pope Paul VI Institute was publishing a book, and they wanted her to write her story. She was 8 months pregnant, and publish it like before she's pregnant. And she was very concerned. What if something happened to the baby? What if this has been such a drama for her for 10 years? I said, I'm not gonna influence your decision. That's for you to decide. If you want to be in the book, or do what you want to do. So she went ahead and she put the story in the book, and lo and behold, she actually had a healthy baby, and the story went ahead. She's one of the women in this Women's Guild book, and she's here, Agnes. God wanted her to come into my office with that kind of story, so that I could encourage and walk the walk with so many women with infertility, because their stories are agonizing. So it was like this story was such an inspiration.
Thank you. You got me so emotional.
It is emotional. It is emotional, but
It's been a long time ago,
yeah,
really.
I never met her son, but you said he's coming today, right?
He's on his way.
He's here. I never met him. I met him 8 months in room, but I didn't meet him in person. So
He's taller than me now.
it's one of those meet your natural mother kind of thing. Well, the son is coming, so I can't wait to meet the son.
Yeah.
So this is Agnes, and she'll tell you a little bit more about her, what happened to her, with her side of the story.
So hello everyone. I'm Agnes. I'm from Poland. I came here when I was 21 with my high school sweetheart. We got married here, and I always wanted a big family because I come from children of 5. My mother had 5 kids, so my dream was big family. So about 2 years after I got married, I had a big pain on my right side. It came out, I had an ovarian cyst. And the cyst was so big, like the size of my grapefruit, that the doctor at the Lenox Hills removed my ovary also. So here I am, 25 years old, with 1 ovary, no kids. Never had any contraceptives, anything. I'm Catholic, we've been chased. So I had a good friend from Ireland. Her sister had problems, and she knew somebody in Canada and who told her about Cretan method. So we came all the way from Canada through Ireland to New York, and she introduced me to a guy in Rye, Westchester. So I went there with my husband. We started charting. She said maybe I had 10 charts, probably more than 10, but it was so much. And my problem was ovarian cysts, irregular cycles, low progesterone. So, and I've been sending parts to Nebraska. The doctors were looking at them, and they gave me progesterone shots. So I was on progesterone, and guess who gave it to me? My husband. He's a contractor. So he learned how to do it. It was really painful because the progesterone is like oil thick, right? Doctor, it's very thick, so it had to be done intramuscular in your butt. So it's been painful, but it was very convenient because I ordered it in Nebraska, they shipped it here, and it was done at home, so it was really least trouble. I had my blood drawn like on the 7th cycle of my mom. I had to find a doctor who would centrifuge or spin my blood and send I FedEx serum to Nebraska. And it's been done, so my progesterone was ordered, administered according to the progesterone level I had shipped to Nebraska. So my biggest challenge in New York was get a hospital to agree to draw my blood like almost every other day, from like day 5 to day 12, freeze the blood and ship it to Nebraska. This was like my major challenge before I was told I need surgery. So I found St. Joseph's Hospital, Queens Boulevard. It's no longer open, it's closed. And they wouldn't, it's like, who is this crazy woman? They didn't know even how to code it to, how to pay for it, because there's no code for it, because they had to freeze it. It was, So I went to the finance department, I told them what I want, they said, okay, if you prepaid for all those treatments, we will do it. You just go to the lab, tell them what to do, when to do, and they freeze it, and you can ship it. So it was done then, and they checked my LH, progesterone, all the hormones they could check. So it turned out that I have a black tube. I couldn't get pregnant because I had black tube. I probably had chlamydia at some point in my life, and I had adhesions, and they had to be surgically removed. So I worked out with my insurance, and I got clearance to go to Nebraska. This was almost 10 years after we got married, and I had to get period because the surgery had to be done day 10 of my cycle. So it was, I remember it was Sunday night, and if I didn't get period that night, I could not go to the surgery because it could not be done, it had to be done on a specific day. And God will is so good, and I got period. We drove there, we took a road trip, we stayed there 2 weeks because I had abdominal surgery, open abdomen surgery. They did, Dr. Hilgers cleaned my adhesions, did the selective fistulosophicogram, am I saying it right? Which he put the dye in the tube and to see if the dye was spilled out after the surgery, so to make sure that the tube was open. So he did it, he videotaped it, he showed it to us. So he said this is as much as he could do, the tube is working, and he also put a vortex on my tubes, which is a blanket, to prevent adhesions, and we had to stay there like another 10 days to remove this blanket, the vortex. And after that, we came back. I was also on medication like Clomid. He gave me minimal amounts of Clomid and some progesterone. And so it was like March of 2002. My sister already was pregnant with the second baby, and nothing. So I just was giving up after like 12 months of doing the Clomid and stuff. That's when I saw Dorothy. I said, I can't do it anymore. It's just, I leave it up to God. And 3 months later, I was pregnant.
Our last witness stroke is Michelle Pratt, who's the office coordinator for the Gianna Center in Manhattan. She's a certified fertility care practitioner, and she's also certified fertility care educator.
Hello, my name is Alicia Creek. Originally from Long Island. I actually went to school right across the street from where Dr. Carpentier is practicing. Now I live in Brooklyn with my husband. I really loved women's health. When I was in college, I studied biology, and we had a course where we just studied human embryology and how the women's cycle would work. and I loved talking about it. I would have girls come in, in the dorm, and they would say, "Oh, my menstrual cycle is," and I would just say, "Come and sit. Let's talk about your menstrual cycle." It was a little strange. I didn't have any qualifications to talk about any menstrual cycle whatsoever. I was at the time pursuing pre-med, and I did want to get into obstetrics and gynecology because of my interest in women's health. But I kept finding in obstetrics and gynecology that the answer to all of the problems that women were facing was the pill. You have endometriosis, let's put you on the pill. You have ovarian cysts, let's put you on the pill. And that just wasn't good enough for me. Whenever women would come into my dorm and say, "Oh, I have really painful periods, and my doctor said to go on the pill." I mean, I'm a college student just like you. I have no jurisdiction over what you should or should not be doing. I have no advice for what should be happening in your cycle. And I felt like I couldn't offer women anything. So a couple of internet searches, thank you Google, brought me to the Creighton model. And I became a practitioner in 2009, and was not sexually active, was just dating my husband. But I learned about women's cycles so much so that I was teaching women who had been married for 10, 15 years about their cycles and how they would be able to achieve or avoid pregnancy. I have taught I've taught girls from age 14 up to women age, I believe the oldest I had was 55, going through menopause, and everything in between. And it was just really beautiful to see these women go through their cycles and to really find the gift of fertility that they had throughout their cycles. And now, I have the license to talk about it. I'm not just a girl in a college dorm room. I actually have the training where I can talk to them about their cycles, help them through their fertility, help them to navigate days of fertility versus infertility. Now, when Maurice asked me to come and speak, she asked me to give a little witness on avoiding pregnancy, which you can see. It did work very well for us. My husband and I, we met in college. We dated for 2 years while we were in college, and then 2 years afterwards we dated for long distance. And when we got engaged, I said, there are a lot of methods out there, but as I was teaching the Creighton model, and I said, this is a marriage, and I want this to be open discussion, but I really believe that the Creighton model is the best model out there. So I gave him the introductory session in his bedroom. We didn't want his brothers and sisters to know. So gave him the introductory session, and then I opened up my chart in front of him. And it was a very vulnerable moment for me to share my fertility with someone else, not a doctor. This is my then fiance, and say, okay, these are days of fertility, these are days of infertility, these are the days we would use for intercourse if we want to get pregnant. And I had taught women before then, but to then teach my soon-to-be husband about my fertility, I believe Dr. Carpentier spoke on this a little bit. I had that self-worth and that dignity. I knew the respect that I deserved, and I knew that he had to give me that respect. And it was a beautiful, vulnerable moment for me to be able to stand in front of my soon-to-be spouse and say, this is who I am, please accept me. And for him to look back at me and say, I accept you for who you are, I love you. After that, he moved from Canada. He is a wonderful Canadian. If any of you like hockey, that is their national sport. I've learned to love hockey just as he has learned to love me. So he then moved to Brooklyn. I started working at the Gianna Center shortly before we got married. We successfully avoided pregnancy for 5 years. For 5 years, we were able to look at our chart and say, this is a day of fertility and we're going to avoid pregnancy. or this is a day of infertility and we're free to have intercourse. Each cycle was different. I had a very, I didn't have the most difficult chart, but I had a more difficult chart than what I have normally taught. I did have to have surgery, I believe, 7 months into our marriage, and to have him look at my chart and still accept the fertility that we had in our marriage was a beautiful thing. So he was able to support me through the surgery. We were able to make decisions together on when we were to achieve or avoid pregnancy. And there were months that it was really difficult. It was difficult to say, no, we can't have intercourse today because for whatever reason, financial, familial, emotional, spiritual, praying, having God in our relationship and praying, is this the time that we should achieve pregnancy? And hearing that no, it's a hard pill to swallow, no pun intended. But when you're with your spouse and walking along that journey with your spouse together, hand in hand, it just makes the cross more bearable. So we were able to avoid pregnancy for 5 cycles, and then the cycle after our 5th anniversary, we were able to look at each other and say, go time. We achieved this little one. We're due on September 8th, which is Mary's birthday in the Feast of Catholic Church. It has been a wonderful journey. I'm really looking forward to the rest of the journey that we have together. But it's also a great testimony that I'm able to give to my children. If we have a daughter, I'll be able to teach her the Creighton model. And if we have a son, I'll be able to teach him about the respect that my husband gave to me and that all women deserve. So thank you all for coming tonight. I have taught the Creighton model since 2009. And I also, with Maurice, now have been trained to teach, to train practitioners. And so we're hoping to get a practitioner training set up in the New York City area so that we're able to have more practitioners so that we can bring this to more women. To just allow the testimony of God working in our lives to bring about the beautiful children of God that we're able to co-create with Him. Thank you so much.
I should have said that from the beginning. I thank Monsignor and I thank the Bishop and I thank the School of Evangelization, but I really need to thank the ladies who have helped to put this event together and prepare this night. I forget to thank the man who's been great support for me in this journey, my husband Vitae. Without him, I would have not been able to become a practitioner. And Agnes, please come in. Agnes' son is here, so... and how the Creighton model and nanotechnology are building a culture of life and empowering women to be in tune with her cycle. And we're so grateful for your presence here, and we had a lot of materials put in your folders, some of them to help you be an advocate, to go out and spread the good news. People need to know about this good news. We can't only, us the practitioners, be doing it. We're trying to educate people about it because there is so much need for it. So we thank you for being here, and yes, thank you.
So Bishop Mansour, 49 years since this encyclical Humanae Vitae was released. What can we say about the impact of the ideas in it?
I think it's been a tremendous impact. I could say it was an explosion. Everybody was heading one way, and then an 80-year-old celibate asked us to reconsider. And that's what I love about Humanae Vitae. It was prophetic.
but it, its reception was very, very poor in many countries, the United States included. It was seen as, wait a minute, we're modern. We don't want to be going back to the old days. We want to move forward. And Pope Paul VI in Humanae Vitae said, yes, move forward, but move forward with wisdom, and move forward with an understanding of the beauty of man and woman, and the beauty of the fecundity of woman, and the health of woman, and the emotional, spiritual, physical complexity of woman. And don't jump into artificial contraception, because you have no idea what consequences would come from that. And his biggest concern was that man, instead of cherishing his life partner, would see her as everything else around him, something to be used. And that was from a man who was never married and who was getting up in age and was advised not to teach the way he wanted to teach on this topic. But behind him was Pope John Paul II as a cardinal at the time, and who had written beautifully, and Dr. William May at Catholic University had written beautifully about the relationship between man and woman, how it's a sacred trust and entrustment of one to the other. And Paul VI in Humanae Vitae spoke about that very beautifully.
And do you think people have tended to dismiss this encyclical as, maybe a message that we can't live with, or we're too modern to accept?
I think so. The vast majority of Catholics have rejected it, haven't even taken a look at it. And that's not including the rest of the world, who's already heading down that path. And Paul VI wanted to throw some cold water in the face of the world. Not to be mean, but just to get us to wake up. Everything today is natural. We do natural organic beef, natural organic green beans. Everything is natural, except when it comes to family planning. That's something I'll never understand. It's we run right away. We cannot conceive children. We run right away to in vitro fertilization. We want to space our children. We run right away to artificial contraception, and especially, which is, to me, I'm not a woman, but for me, if I was a woman, I would want to say, wait a minute, I have my own hormones. I don't want to add something to the mix. I can't even keep track of myself right now. And I would say that same thing as a man if I was taking hormonal treatments. But natural green beans, natural beef, but unnatural family planning and unnatural conception of children.
And what resources exist now that weren't even around then, that I guess flesh out this whole vision of humanity?
Well, back then was the old rhythm method and the Billings method and other very astute men and women gynecologists. But it's the science has mushroomed into an amazing variety of different ways in which a woman can track her fertility. And one particular way that the Diocese of Brooklyn and the Eparchy of St. Maron jointly put together was something called NAPRO technology. It's N-A, capital N-A, natural, NAPRO, P-R-O, procreative. So NAPRO technology, and it's a technology by gauging from the woman's cervical mucus her exact cycle, so that she can track when are the most fertile days and when are the most unfertile days. And by doing that, she's master, she's queen of her own body. Nobody else. The gynecologist is not master of her body. No one else is. She is. She knows what's natural. She knows what her body, the upticks and the downticks. And for instance, if she wants to be pregnant and is having a hard time, she can, by a variety of different ways, find ways to open wider that window of monthly fertility. And if she would like to space her children, she knows when to space sexual intercourse so that the times in which man and woman enter into that beautiful union is a time in which they can be one, but they most likely will not bring a child into this world. And this way, but I say most likely, it's not a perfect science, but it's much better than the artificial methods. In fact, according to Dr. Carpentier, who was at our workshop, he said for those women who want to be pregnant, instead of paying $19,000 for in vitro fertilization, they'll pay about $600, learn a little bit more about their own body, and 96% sure of what they can do to help her bring a child into this world. And 94% for those who want to space their children and to know when the times are fertile and when they are not.
You know, as a document on the church teaching, has Humanae Vitae been presented negatively?
That's a good question. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I see the church as gorgeous, not just beautiful, gorgeous. And in this beauty lies Humanae Vitae. And some people see Humanae Vitae and the church as the church of no. Humanae Vitae, the church of no. I see it as the church of yes. And Humanae Vitae, reaffirming 2 thumbs up, yes, for woman. And I say that because the warning to man. Paul VI was afraid that man would no longer see woman as his lifelong partner, worthy of walking with her through her ups and downs, but as someone to be used for his own pleasure. And even Paul VI mentioned that there are natural ways in which we can regulate the births of our children. It doesn't mean that we have to have a child every time that there's, every year. It does mean that when we want to space our children and perhaps give them a little bit more than we could if we had a child every year, we could find a way to still be open to God and open to one another, and not to have to lie to one another about anything, but that sexual embrace will be a unitive and a procreative mystery. And that's quite beautiful. So Humanae Vitae and the Catholic Church, the Church of yes. Yes for the affirming the complex beauty and awesome fecundity of woman. Yes to the responsibility of man to understand that and take a few more minutes to really understand who his wife is, what she longs for, what she hopes for, what disappoints her. And a woman who can say, I'm queen of my own body. I don't have to put something in or take something out or do something in order to avoid bringing children into this world. I can do it myself with some creative understanding of my own body. So it's I think, the Church of Yes, Humanae Vitae, the prophetic encyclical of yes. I was reading recently a national report studying 197 dioceses and eparchies in the United States about natural family planning. And part of it is very positive in the sense that now every diocese and I think eparchy is working in the area of natural family planning to promote it among their married couples, their engaged couples. even teaching it in a variety of ways in school, hopefully in colleges. But the report is also it's a dismal understanding of the dent that we're trying to make in society. Most gynecologists, most doctors don't even bother with a natural approach to family planning or a natural approach to conceiving children. They're quick to give a financial gain for the in vitro fertilization business, a financial gain to the artificial contraception business, but they're very slow to promote natural family planning for either. So the report was good news and bad news, and I think also the report was kind of disappointing in reaching Catholics themselves, Catholics who should be promoting this throughout the world. But also the good news is that this approach is attracting not just Catholics, but non-Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox, Muslims, non-believers, naturalists, health, people interested in health. And so I think this Humanae Vitae is only 49 years old, but it's triggered a response in mankind, like anything prophetic. Our 80-year-old celibate Pope Paul VI has created an awareness in the hearts and minds of people about the beauty of woman and the natural complexity of her monthly cycle, and of the responsibility of man to come to understand her and her equilibrium.
And what effect did this writing have on you at the time?
Well, at the time I was a college student. I was studying, I was in fact a high school student when it came out in 1968. But before I entered the seminary, I was studying to be a biology teacher and a health ed teacher, and a small portion of that health ed program was sexuality education. So that was my interest. And back then, there were controversies about natural family planning versus artificial contraception. And I remember back then having a question of, is the church right about this? Why does the church want to impose her will upon people? They're all going the other direction. Why does the church even bother to teach on this? Why don't they just shut up and let people do what the heck they want? Slowly and surely, as I studied and went deeper and was close to married couples and engaged couples and close to young men and young women, I found the truth is that the church does not want to impose. You can do whatever you want. People will do whatever they want. But here is a better way, a natural way, a way that affirms the beauty of woman, the natural complexity of woman, and limits man's desire to own and take and use, and gives man an opportunity to really be a better man by respecting that natural cycle in his wife. So I'm all for it. I'm all in.
And do you see, is there any, did the report say anything about, next steps, or how they're gonna, are they just gonna try to step up their game, or is there just any different strategizing that's taking place?
Yes, they made an excellent point. They talked about proximate and remote education in this area. Proximate is for those couples who are getting married. Now, every couple getting married in the Catholic Church should understand natural family planning and should have, and the report said almost every diocese has something, but in a lot of places it's meager. It doesn't give them a good, full understanding of the choices before a man and a woman. But so that's the proximate. But they said we should encourage a remote study of this. In other words, maybe in high school biology courses. And it can be done without getting into sex education. This is a science of a woman's complexity. And in colleges, and in universities, and gynecology schools, and in marriage enrichment programs, and in lectures in the parishes, like we had between Brooklyn and the Eparchy of St. Marin of Brooklyn. So the many ways in which we can teach and prick the consciences of people to look deeper into this. As I said earlier, we want natural foods and natural air and natural water. But when it comes to spacing children or conceiving them, we want something artificial. This is one way in which the church has a great gift to offer. It's the church of yes, not the church of no, thou shalt not, but the church of yes to natural, to complexity, to beauty, to relationship. The church of yes.